Hey everybody, it's John again, and we're talking compensation today. I know we talk compensation a lot. It's a very hot topic and something that is always, I hope so anyways, always on everybody's mind. So today we're not just talking about compensation. We're not talking about fair market value. We're not talking about salary versus signing bonuses versus renegotiations. We're talking about how compensation in a contract is not always straightforward. You may have a lot of different structures out there. So maybe you have a straight salary. There's no bonus. Maybe you have a shift rate. Maybe there is or is not a bonus on top of your shift rate or your salary. You could be an independent contractor or a W-2 employee or a partner or on the partnership track. You could be doing locums. All those have different nuances to the compensation structures as well. But they're not always, again, straightforward, and words matter when it comes to analyzing a compensation structure. So first off, is it salary and production? If so, how is the production calculated? Are you on an RVU basis or are you based on collections? If it's RVU, it's important to know what data they're using for the RVUs. Are they using the data from 2020 from CMS? Are they using 21, 23? Are they using a newer data set? Will they update it every year? Those things matter, and they're not always specified in a contract. So it's important that you ask if it's not detailed in the agreement. There may be a benefit to you having 2020 versus 2023, for example. So it's important to know what RVU values they're pulling from CMS as far as calculating yours. It's important to know how they're factoring it. It's important to know how they're taking multiple procedures or multiple codes during a specific event. It's also important to know if you have an RVU bonus, if it's prorated per year. It's important if you've got let's say your RVU bonus is 6,500 RVUs or more per year. Well, what if you only work for 8 months and you hit 6,000? You're trending to hit well over 6,500, but you didn't cross 6,500, even though you would have if you would have worked the year. So having it prorated matters, but those words aren't always clear in contracts. How do they analyze the data for the RVUs? Do they use a specific data set? If so, which one, and what number do they pull from the data set? And we'll get more into that later. If there's a conversion factor tied to it, let's make sure that it's defined. We've seen more contracts that define the conversion factor as however this data set interprets it. But we don't know how they're going to calculate that. We don't know what data they look at in the data set. And again, we'll talk more about data sets here in a few moments. But if you're collection based, a lot of the same rules apply. If it's a threshold over 500,000, you receive 40% of collections. What's the payer mix? What's the likelihood that you'll be in one office versus the next? And maybe there's different payer mixes to different offices. Maybe you'll have more Medicaid patients or more Medicare or more private insured patients. Maybe they have a concierge practice on the side. If so, how do you get paid for those particular patients if you're able to enroll patients in that part of the practice? When do they calculate the collections? Is it by the 10th of every month? Is it once per quarter? Is it once per year? Because that matters. Do they prorate it on an annual basis? Because again, if your threshold is 500,000 and you collect 400,000 inside of a 6-month period and you quit, the proration should be 250. So you should get a bonus on the 150,000, but you might not if the contract is not clear. So again, words matter. It's important to understand all of those things if you have a bonus structure. But what if you have a quality bonus and it's $50,000 or up to $50,000? Again, all those same principles apply. Is it prorated for partial years? What are the metrics? What's the average capture rate? A lot of those things can be discussed up front with the employer. It's important to know about the fair market value analysis and what they include in it. Do they include signing bonuses and relocations and student loans? All those things matter, and they likely will take them into account. So are those things forgiven over 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years or longer? And how does that play out into the fair market value calculation of the employer? It's important to know about repayments and what are the carve-outs for repayments of any student loans that might be paid upfront or over time or monthly. It's important to know the repayment provisions for any signing bonuses or relocation amounts or any other type of incentive that you might have before you sign or on your first paycheck. It's important to know how these things are included in the initial language. We've seen contract language that will say the signing bonus is part of the base salary. So maybe the salary is $300,000 and there's a signing bonus of $10,000, which will be taken out of the first year's salary. So now your first year is not $300 plus $10,000, it's now $290 with a $10,000 advance on your salary. So small words matter, like a signing bonus advance of $10,000 out of the base salary in year one might mean that they're taking that out of your salary. It's not an incentive to sign, it's just part of your base salary that they'll give you ahead of time. And maybe you ask for that. Or maybe you didn't. And maybe you think it's a signing bonus, but they know that it's an advance on your first year compensation because that's how they're calculating their fair market value. How do they calculate fair market value? We'll do a episode here coming up on fair market value. But it's important to know how they calculate it, how they analyze it, what data sets they use. And just because you say I use MGMA data, great. What data set do you use? Do you use the minor geographic region? Do you use the regional data? Do you use the national data set? What's the N on these data sets? Do you use all practice? Do you use hospital-based? Do you use a community under 250,000? Do you use federally health qualified or non-federally health qualified depending on the facility? So just because they use MGMA doesn't mean that we know exactly what number they're using, because you may say I use MGMA for the Midwest because we're in Iowa. Okay, great. I still don't know which number you're using. There still are multiple numbers that you can pull from when it comes to the median or the 75th percent of MGMA. It's important to understand words like the cap on compensation. Maybe the contract mentions that you won't earn greater than the 75th percentile of a particular data set. Or maybe it says you won't earn more than a certain dollar amount per year. If so, okay, why? And what happens if you get there? Do you keep coming to work and you don't get paid? So those things matter when it comes to looking at compensation. It's important to understand if it says you get paid $300,000 for 182 shifts, great. What if you do more? What if you do less? Those things matter when it comes to analyzing compensation. And again, all this has a layover with regional, with employer, with 1099, with locums, all of those things matter when it comes to analyzing compensation. So the whole point is that compensation is definitely not straightforward. And when it comes to analyzing yours, you may not just look at it and say, it's good, it's bad. Benefits on top of all of this might play a role. So maybe you have 6 weeks of vacation and somebody else has 3, but they get paid less money or more money. Maybe that matters. Maybe there's a retirement plan. We worked with a physician yesterday, and his retirement plan was a full pension. He had to commit 5%. The employer committed 10% of their salary. And then when they retired after a vesting period, they were given their full salary, an average of the top 5 earning years until they died. So that's a heck of a benefit. That's hard to walk away from, even if you're making $20,000 or $30,000 or maybe more or less per year than if you're working at a different facility. So when it comes to analyzing compensation structures, I can't say enough that the things matter and that these are very complicated structures. And if you have issues looking at the words in your contract and you have questions because maybe you feel like it's not straightforward, or maybe you think it is, but you don't know what word is missing or what word might be added without intent by the facility to confuse you, that might throw a loop in what you think the true compensation is. So if we can help with anything, we're always here at Contract Diagnostics. Reach out, but if you've got it on your own, that's fantastic. We're excited for you. But as always, send your questions in if you have any, and if we can help, reach out, contractdiagnostics.com. I'm John, and we're looking forward to connecting soon.